What do you think of that tune?
I like it.
That's from world famous DJ Disembodied, an original track.
All right. On.
Here we go. So it's ThursdAGE, and we have a special guest. Owen's feeling under the weather, but the show must go on, especially because we've spent some time planning some stuff on the calendar, and we don't want things to get too backed up. So our good, dear friend and frequent contributor to the program, I like to call him modern age Malcolm Sheppard. Actually, I just call him Malcolm. We don't really have a nickname kind of a thing, do we?
No.
But yeah, you decided to join us today. You graciously are lending your expertise for this topic that, I don't know, can it be contentious?
Well, I don't think it's contentious at all when it comes to what happens at your table, right? I mean,
fair enough.
I have a whole bunch of games, and I draw from that library all the time when I'm running my own games. And it's kind of like asking, like, can I draw from books or movies or anything
Lived
else?
experience, even. Yeah.
When it's just you, then of course there's no problem. Now, if you're going to design something and share it for money, then maybe it gets a little different. Now, I am not a lawyer, but I will say that unless you have permission via a license or something, generally reproducing text from games verbatim is not something companies like you to do. Right.
Our buddy Philip is in chat and says, I steal from games all the time. Good ideas are good ideas. Absolutely. I mean, and arguably in our space, the tabletop role-playing game genre, it is, we depend on inspiration.
Yes.
To bring new and innovative ideas to the table. That I think that there is probably a consideration when you start creating your own stuff that you're doing it in a way that make sure that you're not accidentally sort of filtering in something that is a signature piece of somebody else's work. But
but that's really that's really sort of a more of a pro thing, right? Like at your own table, like just do it, go nuts. In fact, I think it is actually kind of a duty when you start out with any game to just wear out all the cool ideas that you brought from other things, especially when you're young and you're starting out running games.
Okay.
Like oh god, my campaign, my old D&D campaign setting, aside from being just a place to throw published D&D modules on and make up my own stuff and things like that, I borrowed a lot of stuff from like the fantasy and science fiction authors I was reading at the time, like Larry Niven and Caffrey. And I was reading Musashi, which is like this biography of the swordsman by Eiji Yoshikawa. And so that's where I got a lot of inspiration for like this kingdom. Actually, I think I know where that map is right now. I kind of wish I had it with me. But one of the things that I stole from Dragon Riders of Pern, in fact, for my teenage fantasy game, was the idea of, in the Pern books, and keep in mind, Anne McCaffrey has said a lot of things that I dislike, so this is not an endorsement of Anne McCaffrey's views about anything in particular. But the Pern books, their whole premise is that there is these planets that come, there's Pern, and then there's this other planet that comes close enough to Pern that you have this invasive alien species that's called Thread that traverses the distance and tries to kind of burrow into Pern.
Yeah.
the idea with Dragon Riders is the Dragon Riders go and they burn all the thread before it gets there, right? And the backstory is that Pern, the world, is, you know, ye old long lost space colony. So in my game, in my old D&D game, this is when I was like, oh geez, like 13, 13, 14. I stole that, but the idea was that all the psionic monsters were on this other planet, like all the ones
Mm-hmm.
with psychic powers, like mind flayers and intellect devourers and all of those things, right? Were
Intellect
from this
devours.
alien planet, and that occasionally they got too close together, and there was an apocalyptic event, and that's why you had dungeons, and that's why you had like weird psionic creatures, and all of that stuff, right? So totally, you know, so it was lifted from, you know, the Pern books, but it was used as a way to kind of tell a detailed story about why certain signature D&D monsters were there,
Sure. And
right?
that in itself, that original concept that you picked up from those books is not necessarily an original concept in its
Well,
whole.
yeah, I have no idea, you know, I have no idea what the archaeology of a conjunction leading to an alien invasion is, right? Because
Yeah.
some of the, like the earliest, I think there's like some really early kind of quasi speculative fiction from the Hellenistic period. If I
Really?
my
I'm
school
unfamiliar
days,
with.
um, well, nobody's familiar with it because it's tedious to read and it's kind of parodic, um, because it was done, I think, as a parody of Herodotus and other historians, right? Because and the kind of fanciful tales that they would tell about distant places, right? So this story about different worlds and everything and visiting the sun, you know, includes frequent interjections of like, you know, well, if you're stupid enough to believe that, then you can believe this.
Sure.
Oh, you know,
Yeah,
that
I'm
gets
looking
into
at
a
this now.
whole like I have a personal interest that will waste everybody's time with that though, so I'll go past that and
You're off
and
the
move
hook
forward.
first.
So you know, so the D&D game, the last D&D game that I ran, actually no, the last old school D&D game that I ran, because I kind of did a personal project where I ran um, each version of Dungeons and Dragons in chronological order to see, and I kind of pretended that no other game design had happened since then,
Hmm.
as an idea to kind of see like what changes would I feel compelled to make to D&D. But when I did a game with that, like I borrowed a lot from, well, the same things that D&D's creators did. I had basically a kind of dying Earth concept for my personal game, where, you know, things were set 100 million days in the future, and all of the fantasy peoples were basically branches of Homo sapiens. And the reason there were dungeons was because of, like, you know, thousands of years of civilizations growing and dying and kind of being sedimented on top of each other. So, you know, I nicked stuff from Jack Vance for that, from Gene Wolfe, who is one of my very favorite authors. He also helped invent the Pringle too. So, you know,
The
yes,
actual
we're trying to
Pringle.
like, yes, the actual Pringle. In
Oh,
fact, there's an urban legend that says that the Pringles logo of a mustachioed man is in fact a stylized version of Gene Wolfe's face.
that's
So
great.
yeah, but he's also, you know, he was also one of the uh, greatest uh, greatest fantasists of the 20th century too. Um, so yeah, I mean, for story things, uh, yeah, I mean, for your personal games, yeah, go nuts. And you know, some things that are inspirations you find in pieces, and those pieces don't necessarily strongly belong to any given group. And I'll give you an example of that, right? Like I for the threefold setting for modern age, right? all the characters who belong to one of the in-game factions of the sodality, they get a badge that acts as a communication device and has a couple of other utilities. And
Mm-hmm.
they belong to one of 3 branches, each distinguished by color.
Okay.
Now, totally coincidentally, I'm a big fan of Star Trek.
Oh. Oh.
Where they also have, color-coded divisional branches and special badges,
Yeah.
right? But but it's not like Star Trek owns those ideas,
Right. Right.
right? Um, and there's a lot of stuff like that, right?
I agree. I
Where
agree. And I think it's important to at least acknowledge that in this process, it's real difficult to find a brand new, unique idea in these in this economy.
yes,
And so I think it's important to consider, as you are building your worlds, if you're doing it in a pro setting, and
hmm
the line between just player and just table and pro player and pro streamer and publisher developer, it becomes a little bit blurry. And in our time it's a lot blurry.
hmm
There's a lot of people out there who love to play, and they definitely get around and they do their table and they have their long standing
hmm
game that they've played with people for 10, 15, 20, 30
yeah.
years. But then
Well,
they're also publishing stuff.
well, for intellectual property stuff, really the thing, um,
Hey, dude.
it's a concern when there's a when either when you expect to charge money for it,
Yeah.
or if there is sufficiently broad distribution,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, you know, actual intellectual property law around games, I have some knowledge of, but I don't want to talk about it because I'm not a lawyer.
No, no,
Um,
no. And we're not offering legal advice. I think what we're offering is a moral compass.
yeah.
Do things as a good actor, be a contributor, and acknowledge your
Mhm.
homages. But now let's put that away. We spent about 15 minutes or so talking about that. Let's now talk about, where do you steal? What's a good place to find things, and maybe some things that are, maybe not kind of off the beaten path, if you will.
Um, well, this is always a tricky one
Yeah.
because, um, well, first of all, I mean, everybody I know who does a lot of setting based design and development has multiple Wikipedia tabs open all the time,
Oh, sure.
right?
Yeah. This industry definitely makes that a
Um,
reality.
because you need, aside from, basic fact checking and reminders, right? You will, I think we are in a field where falling down a Wikipedia hole is a very common thing, right? So
Right.
for fantasy games in particular, using history as a model in in addition to whatever fantasy fiction inspired you, I think is so important.
Yeah.
Right? Generally, the settings with the most depth are the ones that have callbacks to actual history. That doesn't mean you have to be stuck to every part of that bit of history you're borrowing, right?
Yeah.
This is something where in Fantasy Age Trojan War, um, we talk about this a little, right? The heroic age kind of ancient Greece setting there. It is one where slavery and gender-based oppression and all kinds of awful things are taken for granted. If it follows history, or at least what we suspect to be true from looking at what evidence we have of that period and the stories told about it. However, you don't have to follow those rules. And not only is that, kind of helps make things a little more comfortable for a wider range of players, but it's what people actually did with those sources. When I was doing research for Fantasy Age Trojan War, one of the interesting things I found were medieval depictions of Homeric heroes like Achilles, and and the rest of the team. But but in medieval depictions, and for context, the Iliad was not that well known in the Middle Ages, but some other texts related to it were. But when they would draw scenes from the Trojan War, or illuminate them or things like that, they dressed them up in what people wore during the period they were doing the illustrations in. So you have people dressed as, like, you have Achilles, but he's dressed as a 14th century knight, and he's jousting with an Amazon who's also dressed as a 14th century knight, and they're on horses and everything, and not all of it is, totally unfaithful to the material history, right?
Yeah.
But that's still how people depict things, right?
Yeah.
And certainly you can go a step further in fantasy and make that the representation. In a way, it kind of reminds me of I don't know how much of the audience is familiar with Pendragon, the RPG, but one of the neat things Pendragon does is it borrows from history in this very distinctive way. Because Arthurian legends span a huge swath of time, right, from the Middle Ages to the present, the way Pendragon does things is it compresses a whole bunch of sort of the aesthetics and technology of the period in which Arthurian legends were around into the period of King Arthur's reign. So, at the start of a Pendragon game, people are wearing chainmail. By the end of a Pendragon game, they're wearing high Gothic suits of armor straight out of the movie Excalibur.
No, is this a video game or is this a tabletop?
Pendragon is a tabletop RPG.
Okay. As you would imagine, it's got quite a few.
Yeah, and it is a game that if you are a serious RPG person, that is really worth owning. It is really one of the classics.
Is it Pendragon: The Fall of Roman Britain 2017? Or showing
Oh no.
No.
I
will tell you, my friend, there is
I don't want to play something that depressing.
I know, it really does seem like a bummer.
No.
Is it the Arthurian narrative strategy game? No.
No, it's an RPG. It's a tabletop RPG.
Yeah, I'm trying to sift through the very many things named Pendragon, which cracks me up. If anyone's,
it was designed by the late and very important RPG designer Greg Stafford.
There we go. I found it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and it's Chaosium. I've forgotten that Chaosium had it again. What a great game that is. Right, and certainly it's a game that other games have borrowed inspiration from. There's a personality mechanic system that was actually...
Oh, you just dropped links.
Okay. There's a personality mechanic in Pendragon that was that I've seen reproduced in a bunch of other games. I think getting to using game mechanics from other games, I think basically you do it for two reasons. One is that there's a more streamlined solution, or a solution that's a better fit, or the other is additive. There's there's an idea or a vibe or something you want to add to the game by incorporating these systems.
Yeah.
One of my favorite systems to steal for my house games is a very simple encumbrance system from this game, this old small press game called The Riddle of Steel, right? And in The Riddle of Steel, the way you do encumbrance, which is how much your character can carry, is they have a picture of like four people, and you just point at the person who is laden down most similarly to your character, and you have that much encumbrance, and you take whatever penalty is associated with with that level, right?
Yeah.
So it's much like I've always hated like calculating pounds or coin
Yeah.
weight or things like that in these games, right? But at the same time, I do kind of think that for RPGs, for tabletop RPGs, I do like them to be distinctive from how inventory is done in video games, where in video games inventory is generally very unrealistically generous, right?
Yeah.
Because you're always in Skyrim, right? You are carting around a cheese shop most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Hand
So,
wavy for sure. Yeah.
so I do like to have some strictures there, but I don't want to have to spend too much time calculating them. And then, of course, there are just some things which act as inspirations um, for things that you might design for your own game, where it isn't a lift, but it's more, an idea. And for me, one thing for that is games that use Fate, the Fate system. I think the aspects mechanic in Fate is just amazing. It's just fantastic. Um, and in fact, it is really the part of Fate that I value. And I think a lot of people are kind of the same when they know that system.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that it has certainly been an influence when I've done rules for like expanding the way bonds and relationships work in age games, right? Because there's a similar style of abstraction there. But where aspects in Fate really work is that the context determines whether they're kind of good, bad, or weird.
I
And
like those categories, those
yeah,
buckets. Very
and
applicable.
and that's really interesting. And certainly, I would say it was an influence on how we do alienation in Cthulhu Awakens, right? Where um, having where having your mind get more frayed allows you more insight um, because of the particulars of the system. So, you know, however, at the same time, I never want to reproduce aspects exactly, right? Because I kind of feel like it would be cheating to
Sure.
just go, well, I'll just, lift fate aspects, but I'll tie it to Age's core mechanic, right? Which is really easy to do, by the way. So for your house games, you might consider picking up a version of Fate and like reading the aspect mechanics and just bolting them on if you like them, right? Um, in terms, otherwise, you have some systems that you kind of want to borrow or emulate that have kind of an additive property. Like they bring something new to the core game that wasn't there before.
Right.
Um,
Depth
and
and some texture. Yeah, I get it.
yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to think of an example, a good
Well,
concrete example. Um,
well, let's think about this for just a moment.
mhm.
When it comes to, let's pick. All right, you tell me, as a renowned, celebrated creator in this space, you've got many projects under your belt. You've had a lot of experience. You've worked with other people creating projects that you're working on. What what is the most difficult space? Like, is it creating the setting? Is it like, if we're talking about just sort of blank slate,
Oh,
you know
blank slate.
yeah, like, is it the setting, is it the vibe, is it the purpose, is it like, what flummoxes you the most, specific to this kind of stuff?
Uh, okay. I guess it is immediate immersion. That is one
Mm,
of kind of my creative goals, right? As I would like people to have an experience with many of the games I do where acting within that world as their character is just natural for them, right? Um, and there are a lot of ways to go about that. But I think the hardest part is instilling confidence in the setting for the player. Um, and that is where I think a lot of my work, because as some of you know, I did a lot of work for White Wolf and its kind of successors and derivatives over the year. That's where I got my start.
Yeah.
And one of the things that their stuff excels at is creating that sense of immersion, right?
Yeah.
That's why, in the 90s, there was a vampire LARP on like every street corner, right?
That's right.
So, so
Thanks,
and
Enrice.
that stuff is great. And the way Vampire the Masquerade creates a functional set of social mores for what is pure fiction is fantastic because everybody goes in and they immediately know how to behave. Right?
Yeah.
What I have found challenging is to kind of reproduce those features, but with a different set of implied values, because I think a game like Vampire has the advantage in that you can be told what the social expectations are, but the way Vampire works, a Vampire PC is pretty much allowed to have as their basic motivation that kind of like power hungry greed that is sort of the default for a lot of player character types, right?
Right. Bloodlust and
Well,
only bloodlust. Right.
well, bloodlust or wanting to be prince of the city or all these like basically Vampire has the advantage in that the protagonists are instinctual power gamers within the setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I want that immersion, but I want people to be selfless, it's a little trickier.
Yeah,
It's
because you don't
hard.
want to be too preachy or to hit them over the head with a thing.
Yeah, like
You know,
this is one of the challenges.
You might be fiddling with something very close to the microphone. Just want to
Oh,
let
am
you
I?
know.
Oh, yes, I am. I'm
Yeah.
fiddling with two pieces of plastic and making all kinds of noise. Sorry, hold on.
No worries. No, I mean these are heady topics.
Um,
And yeah,
yeah,
no, I get
yeah.
it. I'm a fiddler.
Like one of the things is again like to go into threefold. We have the sodality.
Yeah.
The sodality are kind of supposed to be good guys, right? I mean that's why they use Star Trek like semiotics, right? And one of the things running it is you have to be clear from the top with your players that if you belong to this organization, you're expected to be a good guy, right? And also, this is a competent organization and can probably tell if you're secretly a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
So you have to get the players on board with the premise right away. And that's tricky because sometimes, okay, I'm just looking at Stan's comment here.
Yeah.
Very few game settings have the kind of rigid class test that, yeah, that's very true.
And by design, I mean
Yeah,
purposefully. That's
yeah, by design. But you know, you don't want to tell people this and then they think that you have prevented them from playing the character they really want to play, right? So there
Right.
has to be a kind of a bit of dialogue saying like this is the expectation of this organization, the setting. Now if none of the players want to be good guys, then obviously you can't make them sodality members unless they are like a corrupt offshoot of the sodality, right? Or fugitives or something like that, all of which is possible and cool, right? But you have to have that conversation first. And in many ways, that's something that has to be born by writing the setting in a certain way that invites but doesn't tell you. But at the same time, when you get to the GM side, you have to give the GM advice to just tell them, right? I know this comes up pretty much every time I come on, but I would say that the biggest problem I see with game groups, the biggest problem when I see in online discussions and offline discussions is is just having people who won't just talk to each other straight. They feel like they have to sort of manage information um, as if they are strategizing against the GM or the other players. And if you are in a situation where you feel you have to strategize against the game master, unless it is, a very unusual, explicitly competitive RPG, um, then your game's in trouble, right? Because there's a lack
Yeah,
of trust from the get go, right? So there are games where you can compete with the GM though, or there's a rotating GM role and things like that, and those are
I
all
do
cool.
like that. I do kind of like those alternative approaches to sort of
Mhm.
passing the mic around. I enjoy that.
Yeah. Oh God, I've been playing with some ideas for that for ages. Actually, this is a nice derivative, an
Sure.
example of derivative stuff. Oh, well, way back, I guess around the time Blade 2 came out,
Okay.
right? With the, superpowered vampire pile drivers, um, and all that. Uh, I was thinking like, how would you run a game with frickin' Blade, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at Blade 2, you have Blade, who is this badass, and all these people who are just not as badass. Um, but Blade is always better than these people, except in a couple of technical areas and things like that, right? So it'd be kind of a
Surprisingly,
bummer
right.
to it would be kind of a bummer to like run Blade 2 as an RPG adventure. However, the way to steal that effectively is to steal something else, which is to say to steal troop play from Ars Magica, right?
Hmm.
Because ours has the same basic concept, except instead of being like a day walking vampire sword badass, you are a kind of Merlin level wizard, right?
Right. Right.
And in ours, wizards are more powerful than anybody else, and they don't try to balance it. Instead, the idea is that each uh, each player makes a magus character, and but only one of them is played at a time, and then everybody else plays supporting roles, right? So basically, instead of a kind of traditional, RPG disaster gang party, oh, sorry, Troy
You're
just
fine.
Troy just told me that I was fiddling with something and making noise again. Uh,
It's funny. You brought up Ars Magica, and Duke brought that up.
yeah,
You kind of broke the seal on that, and I was waiting for Nicole to say,
yeah,
"Hey, I know about that. My first love." Yeah.
yes. Um, but yeah, so I mean, that's the way ours works. Now, I think you could run um, a Blade and Buddies type game in a similar fashion, except the difference is instead of each person having a badass, you just have the one badass and who rotates between players, right? So um, everybody can play Blade or whoever the campaign's Blade is for X number of sessions, and then it goes on to somebody else. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
so I was thinking of that, and I was thinking, well, if I genericize that and call it like Silver Sword and stuff, so you can have this, these adventures that feature like a supernatural monster hunter and their support team, right? Everybody gets a chance to play the cool hunter, but everybody gets a chance to sort of enjoy being in a support role as well. And if you've played ours at all, you know that the support roles are often more fun than playing the main character, because when you play kind of your main PC, often you get very well, you're excessively cautious about them, right?
Yeah.
Because they kind of represent your, biggest emotional, intellectual investment in the game. Um, However, if you're just playing like that wizard's bodyguard, then you can like do all kinds of dumb things that you would never do, right?
Right.
Because if that person dies, then you just replace him with Bob the second, and
Other
you're
Bob.
back to it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's an example of like, I lifted from some media and I lifted from another game, right? A play style from another game and a premise for another medium, and that's how you can make some really interesting things happen.
A question for you, just because and one of the things I love about this, when we ought to actually do is sort of a mini series of sort of you have a very professorial sort of I feel like I'm I'm in a learned environment in a good way. Yeah, it's not to suggest that it's boring or a waste of time. I love it, and I know that people do as well because they share that feedback when we have you as a guest. But I'm wondering, when it comes to moments for you personally, as a person who's been doing this for some time, as a very 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 old man. I'm just kidding. um, have you ever caught yourself cribbing or borrowing something? Not
Yes,
purposefully, but yeah. I mean, do you
yes,
ever try to pick up on?
I accidentally made an NPC that was very similar, in that was very similar to an NPC that was created by Ken Hite.
Mm,
Same name, and
you named
elements of the
Ken
same
Height.
premise. Oh, I told him, and I said, "Oh, I had no idea that I was doing this, right?"
Yeah.
But it was a very small thing, right? And usually when something like that happens, it's a small thing. It is something to, I always kind of keep it in the back of my head because there are some ideas that I have rattling around that I don't really share with anyone because it kind of feels like it's like a superstition. I feel like if I put it out there and don't immediately follow up with something, then somebody's going to reproduce it and follow up with something first.
Right, right. Yeah, I think people can
It's
can even in their own lives look back and go, "That happened to me." I remember
yeah,
that. Yeah.
it's not really rational, but it's how I feel. Like um, I have uh, I have a game slash fiction setting idea right now that is really percolating, um,
Really? Well, let me get my
and
pad and paper.
I'm
Do
not sure what I'm going to do with it, or even if I'm going to talk about it.
fair enough.
But and there's another thing. Like I think there's a science fiction game that I want to pitch at some point, that I think has a decent sort of elemental premise. But
Mm,
again, I don't want to say anything about it. But I will talk about what I just meant when I said elemental premise. Like
okay.
that was some
So roller
real
coaster,
term
my
that
friend.
people use, which I'm not sure they do. Uh, all right. Well, okay. You know how every once in a while you see something and it looks like you don't know how you don't know why it was just invented now because it's the kind of thing that you think someone should have figured out ages ago,
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
right? Um, I think probably the example that comes to mind for me the most is Werewolf, the party game Werewolf.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Well, doesn't it seem like that game should have been around for like 100 years?
It does. It definitely feels perfect. Like you
Yeah.
play it, and you're like,
Well,
I've
let me
fit
just
in.
look.
Click.
Okay, I'm just gonna look it up because I forget the exact. 1986. Isn't
Really
that
is when
weird?
that is
Werewolf.
super weird. I mean,
Yeah.
like, are there other games that are like that at all?
Um, I mean, there must be, right? Like
It
there
just
are
it,
a
it
whole.
borrows a little bit from like Heads Up, Seven Up. Like that's part of why I love it. Like as a
Yeah.
child, you played those heads down games, and someone
Yeah.
come over and
Oh yeah, it's a combination of that and a really rendered down sort of murder mystery kind of thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
But it feels more fundamental than either of those things.
It sure
I
does. Yeah.
think it's entirely possible that, there are so many there's so many games who from especially from like 100 to 200 years ago that we just don't know very much about anymore,
Hmm.
unless you're specialists in those sorts of things, because before easy access to audiovisual media and all the other distractions we had, people had to entertain each other, right?
Yeah.
So, you did have these parlor games, and some of them did have role playing elements. I think the Bronte sisters devised like something that was kind of role playing game like. Um, and certainly you have, predecessors in people kind of inventing and playing in imaginary worlds. You have, uh, H.G. Wells' floor games.
Yeah.
It's sort of one of the like important pre-RPG texts for RPGs. Oh, I am sounding professorial now. Uh,
I like it. I really do. No, I mean, like, you always you leave a little intellectual residue that kind of, I mean, that's not a good way to describe it. A
I
residue,
don't know. It seems
an
perfect to
inspiration.
me.
It's an inspiration, and I'm giving you the business, of
Mhm.
course. And it does afford us an opportunity to kind of get into the mindset of somebody who develops games for a living, but also really truly cares about the people that are playing them. And that's the part of this that I really enjoy the most, because you talk about sort of the art of borrowing and being inspired by and paying homage to and all the kind of funny things that we say. But it's really sort of like, that would really work well in
Mhm.
this idea that I have in my head, and so I'm going to borrow it with love and deference and etc. But the idea that when I asked you, what was the thing that you find the hardest, I was thinking like developing a setting, creating sort of the overall, mood of the piece that informs
Mhm.
all the work and the systems and whatever. And you went right to immersion, which is a mechanical kind of like it's mechanical in that you want to create
You want
activity that immerses people, and I just find that really fascinating.
well, you want systems that encourage people
That's right.
to feel like they're in the setting, right? But it's also kind of a setting duty, and the setting does have to bear. And I like the way you phrase it about like the mood and things like that, because I think a lot of people when they get down to setting design, they think it's about trivia, right? And I
Oh,
think a
sure.
lot of that is because they read what we call map fantasy, so those
Yeah,
paperbacks where you have a little map in the front so you can see where the hero
I think
goes.
Tolkien
And
too had a
yeah,
role in some
the
of that.
post yeah well yeah the
Yeah.
post Tolkien map fantasy, right? Such a huge influence, especially when we get to the 80s and early 90s. Um, and a lot of that stuff is very focused on what I would call trivia, right?
Hmm.
So, where the towns are and what they sell, and, um, a lot of sort of fictional sociology, anthropology stuff, right?
That's
And
right. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of that's cool. But at the same time, you do have to ask yourself basic questions that are a little more related to storytelling, right? Like, what is the core conflict that the setting generates by virtue of it just existing? Um, right. So, in threefold, the core conflict is between the three powers that are vying to become God, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that goes from how the planes are laid out, right down to the individual factions, right? And there's always that conflict expressing itself materially in interactions between player characters and hazards and antagonists and all those things, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's a basic conflict there, right? And that's what separates a setting in which to play a game, um, or enjoy fiction from the real world, right? Where the real world doesn't have a theme. except for whatever theme you bring into it, right?
Sure,
Um,
sure. And
in the
there's more
real
nuance.
world,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
games are kind of the opposite of role playing game settings are kind of the opposite of reality in that um, when we live our lives, we kind of assign a narrative structure to it post hoc, right? Like, a bunch of things happen to you, and then you go back and it becomes a story, right? Like, I am recovering from a spinal injury, and I can think of that in terms of the story of my spinal injury. I was feeling good, and then I fell, and then I fell again, and I was feeling terrible, and now I'm coming out of it. And I have a narrative arc there, right? Um, really, though, those are just a bunch of things that happened, and I assign story significance to it after. In a game setting, however, the story significance is first, right?
Right.
It starts with, there's a conflict, or there's a problem, or there's a neat thing to see. And that is the thing that is the kickoff, and it propels events from there, right? It creates the fiction, or it creates the. How can I say this without sounding even more pretentious than I already do?
Pretentious is
All right. So events in okay, we'll call it events in the setting or story world, right?
yeah.
So material things like, you hit a dude with a sword, right? Like very down to earth things. Those come from big overarching themes, right? That eventually turn into these material motivations where you want to kill someone or someone wants to kill you, and there's action, right? Or there's a social scene or whatever, right? And that's the opposite of reality, where a bunch of stuff happens, and then later on, you put it together as a story to explain it to yourself,
Right.
to provide some structure to our inexplicable world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
So,
mean it makes sense, and it is, I think, an interesting journey. Sadly, when I look at the time, we're out of it. We have we are nearly done, and I've got a couple housekeeping things that I need to talk about. Before we do that, my friend, do you have anything that you want to sort of wrap up? Sort of kind of put a an exclamation point or a semicolon like fancy people like you do use.
oh, geez.
I want to let you think about it because
Hey,
I've got
I'll tell you. No, I
yeah.
know, I know. Well, the first thing is we are having an enormous sale right now,
Oh,
to
you are right on it. Let me go
to
ahead and
reduce
share.
basically to reduce warehouse flooring costs, as I understand it. Um, and those include Modern Age and the Modern Age Companion. So, and those are less than $10 each before shipping, which we don't control how much shipping costs. So
We
it's a
do
great
not.
opportunity to get into the game. And one thing I want to make clear while we're here is that the reason Modern Age is on there is because of some timing for our print purchases that were unfortunate for us, but fortunate for you.
That's
Um,
right.
to wit, right before the pandemic hit, um, my understanding is we ordered a second printing, right? Because Modern Age is doing pretty well. We got a big second printing, and then the pandemic hit, and we couldn't move those books
Now, real quick, I have a question for you.
with the alacrity. Yes.
I know that you are in Canada now. Are you saying pandemic? It sounds almost like a dish, like a noodle dish or something. Pandemic?
Um, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been inside so long, I'm losing track of
Right. You
pronouncing
are starting to
things.
develop. No, I mean, it could very well be the way you say it. But I also like to I like to tease you a little bit. But to elaborate on what you're talking
Oh,
about,
what are you on about, Troy?
yeah. What are you on about? I love it. So the
But
last just where the real quick, I just want to throw this in
yeah.
here for Fantasy Age. We have only 37 left of the Fantasy
Oh,
Age
the Campaign
Campaign
Builder's
Builder's
Guide.
Guide. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's, I mean, and here's the thing. Don't forget, friends, that we're talking about these are books.
Yeah.
These are books. Like these are, full color, hardback in most cases books. Some of the trade paperbacks and stuff, but I mean, we've got stuff from. We've got, of course, we've talked about modern age stuff. We've got fantasy
Yeah.
age. We got Blue Rose. We've got. I mean, I love the narrator's kit. It's one of my favorite kits that we do. But
Mhm.
it was 1995. Now only $4.99.
Yeah.
I've got Orc coming to my house here very shortly because I really want to
Oh,
get
geez.
into it. I just haven't had a chance. I'm in the span of Green Ronin time. I'm a newbie, and
Yeah.
so I need to
Well,
absorb some of
oh,
this
I
stuff.
guess I can mention one thing, which
Okay.
is a few years ago. Some of you may have seen that we mentioned a game called Swords of the Shadow Planet,
Mm.
um, and that game uses a variant of the system found in Orc.
Ah. See.
So, yes,
See what I mean. And how topically, connected is it?
it's not that topically
What
connected
is this?
because Swords of the Shadow Planet is not a comedy game, and Orc is.
But it is also a, a, a system inspired, borrowed, brought
Yes,
to life,
yes,
to in
because I
service.
found when I was running Orc that it worked very well for a lot of swords and sorcery stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what else can I do with it? And one thing that interested me was doing something that was sort of a modern approach to a sword and planet setting, right?
Okay.
Um, without, they're in the um, in the Burroughs Mars books, for example, there's some elements of discrimination that are kind of unpalatable, but also there are elements of there are scientific elements that have since been disproven, right?
Okay. Sure. Sure.
So, Swords of the Shadow Planet is basically like, what if we invented the sword and planetary romance genre, um, knowing what we know now uh,
Hmm. Okay.
about other planets? So that's the game, and right now I'm just taking in first drafts for it, and I'm pretty chuffed about it. So that is
Nice.
so that's a thing that's happening, and when there's more to say about it, I guess I'll say more. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Oh, please go for it.
the last thing I wanted to say, the reason I went into the whole spiel about like why modern age is in there is
Yes.
because sometimes people get the impression that we're like jettisoning the cargo before we, take off for
Oh
parts
no,
anymore.
that's not what this is
And
about.
and that's not the case. We have plenty of things for modern age on deck to come.
That's absolutely right, and I am glad that you brought that up. As a person who spends the lion's share of my time engaging with people about modern age and all of that, I will say with relief that nobody said, "Oh, why is that on there? Are you throwing it in the bin?" And so that's good news, and also a good sort of reminder that hey, things are going well, and so you want to get into the last chance warehouse sale because very quickly it's going to be your last chance. When September's done, so is this sale.
Mm.
I believe, if I recall, there are only 30 days in September, and I say, of which I think how many days are left? 8?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so
According to
here's,
basic arithmetic, I believe you're right, Troy.
and I'm not big on my arithmetic, but
Oh, me
I
neither.
am doing the countdown to October like it's my job.
Hmm. Oh,
October is going to be amazing. There's
yes.
so many great things happening. Favorite time of year. It is amazing. It's incredible. There are all kinds of spooky things popping up, both across our titles and then we've got some partnership things happening. We've got you know a lot to talk about
Mm.
when October comes. Also, costume. You've got to pick one. What do you dress as? What's your go-to?
Oh, geez. Oh, I remembered. The older Joseph Joestar from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'm just a cinch for it because he's a big guy with the gray facial hair and the, you know, and he's out of it a lot of the time, and I'm often out of it a lot of the time.
And now,
Uh,
so what is his name again?
uh, Joseph Joestar from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, a long-running manga
Mm-hmm.
anime adaptation, has been dropped on Netflix,
That's
and
right. And
I'm a big fan of that. That would be oh now there's a license that would be cool. It's just that that manga has been running since 1986 or something like that. So I'm not sure that I can absorb 35, 37 years, however many years, 3+
so,
decades
so
of
this is you,
of a
the
comic from another culture.
right. This is you, the
No,
horrible.
no, no. There's an older one. There's an older one.
I see. So an older. Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that's the guy.
There he is.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, okay, the short cropped purple top and the. I mean, I think you could pull it off. It just wasn't my first pick.
No,
That's
no.
you.
I uh
Look at
I
that
would
kind of
have to eat
Indiana
I would have to
Jones
eat
look.
less than I want to for
You
that
do what
crop
again?
top. So
Say that one more time.
I would have to eat less than I enjoy to really rock out a crop top. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Look at that hat.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
this is very distinct.
yeah. Well, that's when he's older in the run after the run. Oh
I
yeah,
see.
where he has the invisible baby. Yeah. In this like in the JoJo continuity, this
Hmm.
is when I think he's like in his 70s or something, and people have various supernatural powers, and and this baby gets supernatural powers and is involuntarily invisible, and he takes care of the baby.
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
appreciate a nurturing dad type of thing. Oh
I do
yeah, and
too.
he freaks out a lot.
I was gonna say, and this has some real Malcolm vibes to it. He is a fancy gentleman, Stan says. Hey, I also want to mention, since we did start a little late. I will tell you this real quick story as I'm clicking around on things today. I was, tidying up as I do, and I was, kind of spraying down the bathtub, and the handle broke on my sprayer, and the bottle hit the ground, and then all the contents of the chemical bounced up into my face and hit both of my eyes.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
It wasn't a delight, and I did get a little panicky there, but rinsed it out, and and got a little help, and I'm doing okay, and I don't feel like I've lost any vision or anything. But that is why we started just a hair late. And but before we leave, I want to talk about one other sale that we are having, and it is, well, it's the mega bundle. And hang on one second. The mega bundle is 56 PDFs from first and second edition Mutants and Masterminds, some supporting books as well,
Mhm.
tool based kind of books. And you can pick up all 56 of those books as PDFs, $29.99.
Yes. Oh, it's a huge bargain, and also it includes, if I'm not mistaken, a bunch of books that haven't been offered in PDF before.
Absolutely right, and that is the first edition. This is the first time that that they will have been published as PDFs.
Yeah,
And
I know.
people,
I know the M&M team worked really hard to make um, to make that bundle as complete as possible.
they sure did, and it is historically fascinating. It is very well priced. It
Hmm.
is such a good deal. I mean, we're not exaggerating when we say $521.91. Like, that's not a lie.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and
it's an enormous discount.
say that one more time.
Oh, it's an enormous discount. Actually,
Oh,
hold on.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, And what else did I want to say about this? With the mega bundle comes mega opportunity. That's some classic SaaS master there. But you know, favorites, like fan favorites, and people like stuff from first edition that people were very disappointed to not be able to see in PDF form. So anyway,
Mhm.
you want to pick it up. You can pick it up at the Green Ronin online store, or you can pick it up at Drive Through RPG.
That's right.
And that continues a little bit into October, but you
Mhm.
definitely want to jump on that sale for the last chance warehouse sale, because if you don't, you're gonna miss it. And I'm gonna, I'm not gonna laugh, but I'm gonna feel bummed because you're gonna bum out my Halloween month.
Yeah.
And we all know Halloween starts like in
Mhm.
2 days. You got to get prepped and ready. Thank you for asking, but I will be dressing up as well. And we've got some plans around shows. We've got spooky plans for ThursdAGE with Owen. We've got spooky plans for Mutants and Masterminds Monday, which, as you know, is our Mutants and Masterminds program that,
Mhm.
Malcolm, we've been doing this for years now.
Yeah.
We've been doing
Yeah.
it for years.
It's funny how like all the pandemic months kind of feel like one real long month, and
It
then you look
does.
back and you realize it's been like 2.5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so we've been doing this for some time. The other thing I want to mention is that, you want to also head up. Did you know that the Patreon folks, they got the mega bundle? Some of them got it at the hero and prime tier um,
Mhm.
at patreon.com/mutants and masterminds. They just got it for free as a thank you.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah, all of it. The
Mhm.
whole deal, and we picked some, select folks, community leaders and stuff like that over on Reddit and all that. But
Mhm.
all right, my friend. Well, we have. I think we've talked about all the things to talk about.
Oh,
We've shared. You go
just
for it.
one more little thing.
Yeah,
I've gotten a couple of questions about print-on-demand version of Cyberpunk Slice, um, and I just want to tell everyone that it is coming. There was a problem with the initial proof that was ordered, but that stuff has been fixed, and basically we're waiting for a new proof to inspect,
that's
so
right.
that we don't send you a book that is all screwed up.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And
As much
and
as
that's when the
POD,
pod will be turned on.
that's right. As much as POD has improved, print on demand is just taken leaps and bounds. It still requires a good sort of input,
Yeah,
so you don't get a bad output.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. I'm
it's
glad you
it's
brought that.
coming.
It is indeed. All right, my friend. Well, anything else you want to tag on?
Oh, not really. Just
Oh,
take it easy.
yeah, take it easy. Malcolm, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I really do appreciate it. We have a lot
Oh,
of
it's always
fun, and I enjoy it. And we'll be looking forward to having you come on for some stuff coming up in the future. Not the least of which is this Sword of the Shadow Planet stuff that you're talking about.
yep.
Is it Swords of the Shadow Planet?
Uh, swords. Yes.
Swordza. I love it. I love it. All right. With that, I say unto you, good ThursdAGE. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back on Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here in these same places. Thanks, Malcolm.
For
Bye.
Elric and Susie, I say goodbye.